And I will say welcome. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. It's the 28th of May, and it's been 5 years since we've been doing these webinars, and what a remarkable community of practice this has become. I will say welcome. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. It's 8th of May. Why
I hear an echo.
I'm hearing an echo too. Let me see if I can turn that off. Yep, sorry about that. That's the stream at YouTube that was playing through my microphone there. We'll just keep going and pretend that that didn't happen. Glad you're here, and thanks for joining us, and welcome again. Hope you're having a lovely spring and enjoying the transformation from winter into summer, wherever you're at in the process there. I'm going to welcome Eric Matheson into leadership here once again and turn things over to you, Eric.
Great. Thank you. Well, I've really been looking forward to saying this. I think I've said it before, but good evening, fellow treasurers and local trustees. I am now one of you and uh, trying to keep up to date with what's going on with the national office, just like you folks. So, good evening. Tonight, uh, we're actually running out of fresh new material, and so I tried to throw in a number of items that we haven't talked about because they're relatively infrequent, and so I've labeled it "Thinking Ahead," certain situations that may come up for you. We'll cover those, and Dave Jagger will be talking about online payments. All of you, of course, know all the work that Steve has done, Steve and many others. Uh, so we've got a complete treasurer onboarding course now, which is one of my stretch goals for 5 years ago, and I didn't attain it, but Steve did, and really appreciate that. So let's get going. Uh, as always, we recall that this group, the folks that uh, help with the finances and administration, we are very much called to be the church, and without your work, the rest wouldn't be possible. And I've always found that very motivating myself, and I'm sure you do too. Um, but we also will take a moment for a brief land acknowledgement, and I just want to shout out to King Charles, who I thought did a great job with the throne speech, and in particular the land acknowledgement, recognizing a shared history and a need to learn. And a need to live into truth and reconciliation. So I'm using the Toronto base because that's where so many are, the head office, and so many people are. Uh, in Toronto, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and across the country, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. This recognition must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. And that's felt even more important. I don't know. I don't want to get into politics, but with the craziness in the world these days, that feels even more important. Uh, the words that I just spoke. So today we'll cover. We're hoping to cover just some key June deadlines and reminders, and I do think that most of the folks I recognize so many names and pictures that these won't be news to you, but just in case, every now and then, Clyde reminds me of something. I go, oh crap, and stop and get something done. Hopefully that works for you as well. We'll just flag a couple of the Centennial celebration things that are going on, and this thinking ahead. Specifically, we'll talk a little bit about capital campaign language. These are things that people rush to implement whether it's a silent auction or a capital campaign or whatever else, and then later on questions arise. So I've always said, let's try to, as a treasurer, try to get ahead of stuff. And if something didn't work last year, learn from it and make sure it does this year. So we'll go through a number of reminders, but throughout this, I think there'll be more time for questions, and we've had some good exchanges too on the ChurchX forum, which my own practice will be to let folks answer you know, questions themselves and share comments and stuff. And periodically, I'll weigh in with a summary comment or some overview. But it's great to see so many of us helping each other out. Okay, so June deadlines. Well, everybody knows T3010. If we have if I haven't bored you to death with that reminder, there it is again. Uh, Susan Jackson reminds us that even though the deadlines were in March, a final absolute church deadline for her is June 23, because for a whole host of reasons, we want to finalize the statistics, which of course drive all kinds of decision making and in particular the assessment process. But it also enables Susan to get out to Georgian Bay for a good chunk of time. So please help her do that. We'll have a couple of slides on the date change that you've all heard about. It doesn't affect all of you, or even maybe not many of you, but those with a monthly payroll on the 30th or 31st, there is a change that will take place effective June. And we've got some information on that. Gord Swedberg, however we say that, had some email exchanges on that, some questions on, in particular, how that works at year end. 100th anniversary of the church. Again, that's coming up. My own church this Sunday. A whole bunch of Toronto churches, it's called the North Cluster, are coming together at my church for a service that will be recorded and be part of the video presentation on the 10th, or maybe it's whatever day that's going to be. But we'll be having a very special service ourselves this coming Sunday. So there it is, Sunday, June 8th, 5:30 to 7:30 Eastern. I always am careful with Newfoundland daylight time because of that extra half hour. But I'm sure that your various audiences will be aware of this and have seen it many times. From a policy point of view, though, June is also Pride Month, and the church is certainly trying to, during this time when human rights and respect for others seems to be a little out of fashion, the church voice has never been more important. And so we've got a letter writing campaign happening, reminding folks that not every country is as tolerant and respectful of all as our own Canada. So moving more to the more bread and butter issues, the new payroll date. So if you did have a monthly payroll of the 30th or 31st, you've received various chunks of communication, and you can, Angelica has given us some useful pictures on just where to go and how to change that. A reminder, though, that the input deadline is earlier. So, for processing on the 25th, the normal deadline, I believe, is the 20th. Clyde has reminded us of that. And annual cost notification, ADP service fees are going up. Again, folks should have gotten that notification. But here's a reminder again of those costs. The word from Clyde and I, there are a few folks out there still who wonder if they can save money by doing payroll themselves. And even if you're really good at it, it's still so much better. It's so much better to have it done for you and know that the changes and all keeping up to date with all the complexity is done for you. And Angelica's Sorry.
Sorry, Eric, I was just going to one more reminder that if the appointment has ended, the employment has ended, you must terminate your on team pay and issue an ROE. My understanding is that during the summer, there's quite a few appointments that end, so it's important to remember to terminate that on your team pay platform and issue an ROE.
Great. Angelica, thank you. And again, here's the contact information for her terrific team. I think we've, uh, whatever, ADP itself may be a bit have a few challenges, but Angelica's team backstopping them makes the whole thing work really, really well. And yep, a shout out to her whole team there. Okay, uh, just moving on to situations. This is advice that I provided to individuals over the years, but I'm not sure I've got it necessarily got it in print. In some cases, we may have it uh, in the handbook, the financial handbook, updated for congregations. But just in case, uh, when you're asking for money, particularly for designated money, again, a gift not, is unconditional, uh, and it can't be reversed. They can't give it to you and say, "Here, we'll give you this, and if you don't make enough money, give it to us back." So, for example, the most common examples are, "Hey, we have $1 million or 500,000, 100. It doesn't matter what the number is. We have a building campaign, and we're going to do these following things." And then you don't raise enough money. And the question comes, well, hold on a second. I contributed to those fancy new glass towers or whatever it might be. Uh, you should. The best thing to do in a capital campaign is to say where the money will go. And if you can't, for example, if you can't move on the project you had in mind, the money might go to the building fund until such time as a scalable project is possible. But I've seen this happen many times where there's sensitivity, there's a lot of energy in a fundraising campaign. If it falls short, you should have an explanation in advance, because if people start saying, "Hold on a second, you're not doing what you said you were going to do," uh, that's a problem, and you can't. It's not. You can't just say, "Let's reverse the donation." There's potential legal fees, and the basic rule is it's an irrevocable gift. Similarly, if the campaign exceeds target, uh, you need to say what's going to happen to the money. And again, you might say in the if we were so fortunate that we exceeded target, first of all, we would communicate when we're approaching target, but any extra money might be kept for contingency or might be uh, uh, held in the building fund, or you might even want to be so bold as to say we'll go towards general operations. But the point is, in a campaign, best practice now is to say what will happen in conditional situations, so that you don't have this wonderful story. Generous people have given you money. All of a sudden, you don't want that to turn to crap because uh, the the fundraising purpose won't be quite the same as was originally envisioned. So I don't know if there'll be any comments, and we'll happy to entertain any questions on that. But that's a key one.
Sure. I just think it's important to be really clear at the beginning about your ask.
Mhm.
And I think when we're creating capital campaigns, we need to assume that we will either run short or go over. And we have to have a contingency for both in the ask when we're creating it, because you almost never hit it on the nose and don't get another penny. So you have to be able to be clear with people and respectful of their gifts. That's all. And as long as we can do that at the front end, then you don't run into problems at the back end.
And there are emotions with these. If in a
Oh
case
yeah,
where a
big time.
campaign doesn't happen, uh, not people aren't necessarily being rational about it either. So if you're just basically saying, hey, uh, this is the game plan, in a couple of different scenarios, you won't have to deal with a situation where people are threatening to sue you or demanding their money back and all that kind of stuff. Uh, Hopefully, you'll never see that anyway, but I've seen it.
Well, and so Laura's asking another question here. What happens when a capital campaign is to pay for something that's already been paid for? So the money coming in is to replace the investments that were cashed in to, I don't know, replace the roof or something. Is that okay?
Again, as long as you're stating the purpose, uh, that's often a tough capital campaign to replace investments. But if it's working in your wherever you are, that's great. It is a legitimate contribution to the financial strength of a charity. So again, as long as you're clear to the donor, that's what you really want through all of this. And Dave Jagger, I'm sure, could speak more eloquently than I, but you you never want to disappoint a donor, period. And that's really what it comes down to.
I was just going to say that too. Dave Jagger is going to be on the line with us a little later this evening, and I think what you're describing, Eric, is what happens when we're not careful enough at the beginning of our campaigns to frame it well. And so I would strongly urge anyone online who is at the beginnings of thinking about a capital campaign to go and take some of the stewardship courses online. Dave Jagger's team, and you'll meet Dave in a little bit, but Dave Jagger's team are very accomplished at helping congregations frame their ask and do it in ways that are positive and ministry focused and invitational and celebrational. And and they will offer and provide you basically professional fundraising advice for free because it's their salaries are all paid for already. So uh, don't worry about reinventing the wheel. Go and invite them in, work with one of their team members, use the stuff that they've prepared. It's excellent. I've used it twice in my congregation over the last couple of years. Each time our campaigns went over target. Um, Sadly, so did our expenses. So we've still had to take out a loan for the wheelchair lift that is being installed as we speak. But my goodness, without the advice that Dave and his team provided, our church would not have been able to do that.
Yeah, and again, the whole thing. They will also have had to come in after the fact on the messy situations, as I
Sure.
often had to do, which is why we offer, this kind of cautionary advice. This next one's a bit more fun. You know, this is on tax receipting and what you can tax receipt, and there seems to be some confusion. Uh, Actually, there's very regular confusion. Some people think that if you buy something at auction, first of all, that the buyer might get a receipt. That's typically wrong. Sometimes they think that whatever the buyer paid is the fair market value. That's also not correct. So I've listed a couple of situations here that, and hopefully just tell you a few funny stories. At my own church, a now deceased beloved UCW member was famous for her lemon squares. And I suggested one year that we put them into the silent auction as opposed to just leave them in the bake sale. And we bid it up to a few $100 just because we love, just for fun even. Okay. And so what's receipted in those situations and for whom? And there's two things that happen. The most important concept again is in all these situations, you need to state the value up front. So if the value, for some lemon squares, I mean, let's face it, that's $10.
Yep.
If that. Now, first of all, the donor wasn't looking for a $10 receipt, but the purchaser could have asked for a $190 receipt. If we said, hey, this is a $10 item and you just paid $200 for it, you paid over fair market value. So, but the normal silent auction thing is the actual donor, and something may or may not sell for what it's worth. but the actual donor can get a gift in kind receipt for the fair market value of the gift. It might be, uh, you know, I'm going to say Leaf tickets because they're not in it anymore, but some Edmonton playoff tickets would be pretty high value right now. And again, you can receipt if you've dealt with it in advance. You've said the value of this is X. For gifts of like we get a lot of questions, people donating uh, apples or cherries or whatever for food for making pies, which are then sold or something like that. The the best way to deal with that, the whole notion of putting a value on something like that is a bog. And there, if it's from a farm, then it doesn't count because it's part of their inventory or their product, what they sell. So the easiest way to do that is if it is something that is of use to the church, for example, hey, it would be great for us to have all these pies, pay for the ingredients and swap checks.
Yeah.
And that's true for every service that people provide. Like if someone's they're shoveling your driveway, or if they're any, you can't tax receipt a service, but you can pay for the service and have them donate that back, what I call swapping checks, and that is a way that you can offer a legal way to recognize the gift. And the CRA says this right on their website. Their tax receipting information online is outstanding. It's very, very good.
So swap checks is a quick and short, dirty short form. What do you mean by swap checks?
Okay, you pay. Let's just say you needed. Well, I'm going to use the pies example again, and somebody went to a lot of trouble to buy lots of cherries or lots of whatever. You pay for the ingredients, so that was it's a church activity, in this case a fundraising activity. You pay for those. You give the person a check, or you might now pay online or whatever, and with the hope, but not necessarily the legal obligation, that they will donate that back to you. So they will write a check back to you. And if you are doing checks, I intentionally use the language swap checks,
Yeah.
because just endorsing the back of a check isn't a very clear audit trail.
The bank won't accept a check that way anymore.
Yeah, well, I wasn't even going to say that, but it's a poor audit trail in any case, and now a frowned on practice. So much the better.
Yeah. And just to say, the auction thing can be a really fun fundraiser. In my church, we do a baking auction every year. It used to be the men's baking auction, so only men and their children could make the food.
Mm-hmm.
And we told everybody that everything that was brought had a fair market value of $5, and if people bid it up higher than that, they could get a tax receipt for the difference. We told everybody ahead of time, and some of the things went for $150 or $200. It was crazy. They had a lot of fun doing it, and we used the money to send kids to camp.
Well, I'm not sure I should be telling this story, but at a non-church silent auction at a prominent fundraiser a number of years ago, the fellow beside me threw his wife's shoes up on stage, and everybody had to bid on whether she would get them back. And
oh my.
Yeah, no, it was
What's
actually
the fair market value on that?
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to move on now.
I think you should.
Yeah. So here's one that's been in my advice to treasurers and trustees forever. But check what the title is, what the legal documents, and if you have a municipality, you might have you would still have a property tax statement typically, even though you don't pay property tax. See what it says on there. And what you want it to say is the trustees of ABC, whatever your church name is. It's good to have, we still have all kinds of crazy things that come up, but they usually come up at when there's a time crunch, when, like, if you're doing a sale or a lease or some kind of legal thing, and all of a sudden you find up your title's screwed up. It can create all kinds of extra legal bills and expense. And it's much better to, again, just deal with it in advance, know what you've got. The many municipalities will accept a letter with some, standard language explaining the situation that, hey, uh, my own church didn't change its name to United to its proper United Church name until 2011. And it was only because when I became CFO, I said, hey, I can do it myself now. uh, but our church was called the Northern Congregational Church until 2011 when we finally fixed it. We've subsequently had a number of legal transactions that would have turned to absolute crap if we hadn't fixed it. So we also have some sample language recitals that Cynthia Gunn and others put together over the years, which may or may not apply to your situation, but you can try to either avoid legal expense or even provide some of the language to lawyers to help you do this. But again, doing something before you absolutely need it is the concept that I'm introducing here.
Tied into this, Eric, I'm going to suggest that they also check the CRA name that you've got registered and what your bank is using.
Absolutely.
Because they can all be different from each other.
and that's right. And that's caused me problems with two different churches just in the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
So you're best to get them all the same, and it's a bigger problem when it becomes a 2 or 3 point charge too.
Yeah. Thanks, Clyde. That's exactly it. When I first took on my first stint as treasurer, I didn't know what a pastoral charge was. I've since come to think of it as a unit of ministry, but everybody's, in most cases, a single point charge is called Trinity United Church or whatever the name is. And this pastoral, but many charities, charity registrations still have the pastoral charge linkage or wording.
Yeah.
Now here's one that I put lots of question marks on because you're welcome to disagree with me. There's lots of people who don't do this, but I put it out there just as a flag. Hiring church members or church family members, hey, great when it works. Absolutely, like it might be cost effective. It might be providing an opportunity, an employment opportunity. It might be helping some people out. It could be great. It could be win-win many times over. And I'm sure that is the hope always when people do this. And this happens a lot across the country. But if it isn't working out, it can get very messy because the role clarity and everybody's a volunteer and so even trying to handle something like that on an M&P committee can be very very difficult. So what I'm saying to folks, I offer this advice routinely, but I say at least consider the risk in advance. If you got someone who you just think is going to absolutely crush it, you should do it. Lots of folks are struggling to find treasurers or bookkeepers or people to handle the finances. Again, if there's a member of the congregation that can help with that, and this is now I'm talking about on a paid basis, great, but consider the rest. That's all. That's why this has so many question marks, because your own circumstances could be where you've considered it, you're good to go, and it's not like you're breaking a rule or anything.
Yeah. I would say it's not a rule, but it's wise advice to consider the risk.
Mhm.
I've had a situation in my church where we hired a church member to be our administrator, and it didn't work out. And the person who was a longtime member of the church left the church, angry and upset, and everybody grieved. And had it worked out, it would have been great, but often we do these things without imagining the exit strategy if it doesn't.
Yeah. And
In our situation, I still grieve it.
and Steve, it sounds like you dealt with it. What so often happens is you're afraid to deal with it,
Yeah.
and put up with some situations that create more work for everyone, or there's this undercurrent of
It was really tough because the person was a beloved member of the congregation and not performing in the way we needed. We put it off too long and we suffered because of it. And when we finally decided that we couldn't live with the situation anymore, it was messy and really sad.
Yeah.
So I think there's really good pastoral reasons to be cautious about that. It's I don't think it's a rule, but I think you're right. Consider the exit strategy if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Thank you again. Again, it's so good to have people who've actually lived the situation, and so it's not just a theoretical construct.
And
This
Kenji is saying on the line here, what about the opposite scenario where someone's hired by the church and later becomes a member? Sure. I mean, these things happen, right? I mean, we build our churches on personal relationships. But I
Yeah.
think the question always is how do we take care of the relationships? And how do we consider the possibilities that the relationships might go south?
Yeah.
And also, can I just add to the fact that internal controls are incredibly important in specific roles, right? And so when you're hiring family members or when you're hiring specific person that you know, not only the relationship, but that internal control that must be in place for certain positions.
Yeah. And data confidentiality, all those kinds of things. Again, we're not saying don't do it, but just
Cautious.
don't do it by rote. Don't just think about it.
Yeah.
Now this chart, I've shared it so many times. I happen to know that it's from the 2013 March Connects, the extra insert. But this is which is just to say, people think they might be saving some employee and employer source deductions. Individuals don't want to be considered an employee, all those things. But every year, some United churches get fined in the thousands of dollars for willfully ignoring these rules, and small employers generally get, but frankly, other places don't spend a lot of time talking about this anymore. The risk isn't worth it. You just slap everybody on payroll, and that's it. But in churchland, we sometimes think that we might be saving a penny, and again, this is one where you could be penny wise and very pound foolish. So if someone doesn't meet the standards of being a self-employed person, treat them as an employee, even if they have limited hours. And then this computer backup, this is always interesting too. But what happens if your church administrator, whether that's paid or volunteer, your treasurer wins the lottery or leaves in a huff or dies? All of those things have happened except for the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And what steps have you taken to have business continuity? So more recently, we've talked a lot about having at least a backup, and Clyde has said at least two backups on the CRA my business account. But for each of these, does someone somewhere know what your ADP number is? Okay, or can somehow access the reports if the one person responsible in your setting is unavailable for whatever reason. So I've just listed a whole bunch of them, but if you can't get into the church computer because the one person is away, enough said, and that's true for each of these. You don't want to be sharing passwords and stuff. You want some kind of contingent arrangement. Typically, you want to have a separate account with a separate password that maybe is never used, but it's active. So I think that one's self-evident. And I'm wondering if Dave has showed up because I'm sort of moving
Have,
on to.
yeah, I haven't seen Dave yet, but
Okay, well,
we've
I
had a
can.
few questions come in, so let me throw them at you, and then we'll bring in Dave after we're done here.
Sure.
There was a question right at the beginning about the difference between the June 8 Centennial celebration and the June 10 TV show on Vision TV. I can speak to that, but I didn't know whether you might want to.
Anything I say would be a wild guess, Steve.
Okay. So there is on June 8 the official celebration of the denomination that has been organized by the General Council Office. It's being held at Gower Street United Church in Newfoundland. It's being live streamed on YouTube, and the link has been widely disseminated. And that was the poster that Eric put up on the screen for you. The June 10 event is different, and it is not an official celebration. It's been organized by a sort of ad hoc group of folks who are friends, call themselves Friends of the Foundation, but they're not even officially associated with the foundation. Um, there are a bunch of United Church people who wanted to celebrate the anniversary and had some connections and are doing it. And so if you want to watch their celebration, by all means do. But it's not the official celebration. And so Valerie was asking, how do we connect to it if we don't have Vision TV? And I don't know. I don't have Vision TV either. And since it's not coming out of our office, I'm the wrong person to ask. But so that's just to let you know that there are a whole variety of different celebrations happening of this anniversary, and some of them are local, and some of them are various different clusters of churches, and some of them are happening in a single congregation. I mean, celebration is a big deal. 100 years is something to celebrate, and there are all sorts of different celebrations going on. But the official one coming out of the General Council office uh, is the one that's being broadcast on YouTube on Sunday night, June 8. And you can get the link from the General Council website, or I'll go and find it and put it in the chat here. So that's, as I say, that's the one where I was working with the folks at Gower Street earlier today to make sure that the sound is audible when it's actually happening. So that was the first question from Valerie, and thank you for asking it. Valerie's also asking whether there's information at the national website about what to do to lead up through a closure of a pastoral charge, Eric. And I wasn't sure how to answer that, so I'm hoping you have some suggestions.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we do have a PowerPoint deck on ChurchX for closures and amalgamations, separate ones.
Yep.
And each region, this is where you should, first of all, your region has to approve and help manage all of this. Your regions will have pretty detailed documentation as well. The focus I have nationally, or I did have nationally, is more on the CRA compliance side and the legal side. And so there is a webinar deck. I'm trying to think if we did a recording for that one. I don't think we did, but I don't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we did, Eric. And
Okay.
I've put a copy of that in the onboarding course as well.
Right.
So,
So
but the emphasis there really was on charitable status and what to do with your charity number. It wasn't on all of the pastoral issues around closing a church, or even a lot of the financial issues, because
yeah,
those really are stick handled by the regional staff.
yeah, and just to say that the overall theme should be to close well, to celebrate. There's a grieving, a lament element too with a church closure in the hearts of many, but try to make it a celebration, potentially a legacy. But from a national and from my compliance perspective, the most important thing to do is to handle the financial matters, and these are described in considerable detail in the deck, but handle those in a way where the CRA is not following up later to ask where the money went. So generally, it's a good idea to take your balance sheet to zero, before you close off your charitable number. That would be, one sentence, that would be my advice.
Sure. And that's expanded on in the webinar that Eric recorded. So, and I'll show you where that is when we get to the onboarding course.
Okay.
Angelica, I have a question for you, and it was around that shift in the payroll dates. Could you expand a little more on that? Somebody's not quite clear, and I think it was because it was addressed fairly quickly. So tell us again what that's about, if you please.
So pastoral charges that I had a paid date that ended in the 30th or the 31st have been moved to the 25th. It does not involve all pastoral charges, only the monthly pastoral charges.
Mm-hmm. And the reason for that, remind us, it was to avoid some kinds of legal hiccups around.
To avoid the so generally when the pay date was on the 30th or the 31st, quite often the benefit premiums were missed on the reports. Therefore, we needed to do it to an earlier date. So when the reports are produced for the benefits and pension, the premiums are not missed and it's not impacted on the employees.
Yeah. So basically, you're now going to have people paid five days before the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even though it's pay for the last 5 days of the month too. And frankly, that's how it's worked in my congregation. It works really well. So
And Angelica, maybe we answered Gord's question, but maybe you could just expand on this for people who have part-timers or folks with variable hours. The question was how to handle December 2025 or any where there's a calendar year T4 implications and so
Right.
on.
So I had provided actually 3 options, and quite often you have to assess what works best for you. So you can always pay in advance if you have a schedule set for, i.e., if part-time workers are scheduled to work 4 days, 4 hours or 6 hours, and you know that's what it is, then you pay them in advance. That's if someone is on a set schedule. The other one is you can also request special off-cycle payment can be requested with asking ADP to process additional hours, but again, that has cost implications.
yeah.
And the other one is you can actually, if you tell that you agree with the employee that the hours can be carried over and paid on the January pay date, then that is also acceptable. So 3 options that you can choose from.
Yeah, and if I may, as a treasurer, selfishly, the third option is, this is how we do it. And when you're hiring someone, that you tell them that's how you do it. But when you have an existing employee and it's a change, as Angelica said, it's very, best practice is always to try to make it a mutually understood decision, and you do need the employee's agreement.
So basically, the issue is you always want people to be paid within the month that the pay is for. You don't ever want the pay to be deferred by a vacation, by a holiday or a weekend into the next month, because then that causes computer chaos.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At year end, I don't see it being a problem if some of the hours are paid in January. It just goes on the next year's T4 form.
Yeah.
Because the T4s are based on calendar year.
So Kimberly is saying, do I need to do anything about this, or is it just going to happen automatically? I haven't heard about this before.
There was a vast number of communications, and if you haven't heard from ADP, we're more than welcome to guide you on what's going to happen. The payroll schedule should be on your Teams Pay platform already.
And it'll happen automatically. She doesn't need
Yes.
to trigger the change.
No, it happens automatically.
So you're basically giving notice of a change that they can't stop, but that they
Exactly.
don't have to enact. It's just going to happen.
It's going to happen, and what you need to be aware is that you're going to have the money on the 25th and no
Perfect.
longer on the 30th.
Oh, so it
right?
needs to be in your
advance.
bank account. Of course it does. Yes.
Yeah, the money has to be in your
Oh,
bank
yes. Don't
account
wait
on
till
the
the 30th to
25th.
put the money in your account.
That's right.
The money has to be in the bank account 3 days before or 2 days before the
Right
payday.
on. So
That's
that's where the treasurers need to make, yeah, I get it.
right.
Yeah.
That's important, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You were talking about making sure that your legal name is correct on the CRA website and all the deed and all of those things. And there was one more that Bill Allen pointed out, and he said if your church owns a cemetery, check and see who's on the deed for that too, and
Oh, absolutely.
check with the
And
bereavement authority in your province to make sure that it's also consistent.
and folks, I can't tell you. I've seen at least a dozen cases where the named trustees on a cemetery and or a church were not only dead but not even alive in this century, or the last century. We're talking like 1800s and 1900s. So,
Are they in the cemetery, Eric?
exactly. Maybe they could be.
Oddly enough, in our church, everything was good except our records with the local fire department, which showed a deceased trustee. And so we had notices from the fire department going to her house. And none of us knew it because she was deceased.
Yeah.
And although the deed was correct and all of our records with the city correct, the records at Toronto Fire had not changed. So there you go. Jack asks me what we're paid. Our ADP is semi-monthly. Is this going to affect us? And I think the answer is no. It's only for those people who have a monthly payment on the 30th or the 31st, and nobody else
Correct.
has to worry.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
One last question, and then Dave Jagger says he's here, so I think we'll turn things over to him.
Great.
And this is a question for me. So there you go. From Jane, is there a way to access previous webinars by subject rather than just by date? Eventually, but not quite yet. We're still working at making the ChurchX page more user-friendly. But part of what's holding us back is that the information on these webinars goes out of date. And so I wouldn't want you to be reviewing things that were more than a few months old because you might get stale dated information.
And if I may, Steve, just
Yep.
the monthly webinars. That's true because so much of our stuff was dealing with CRA changes and
Yeah.
one-time type events, where there is what I would call an evergreen topic.
Yep.
We've tried to have separate webinars and decks for all those things, whether it's
And
receding, whether it's how things are, ownership structures, making changes, the most common mistakes, all those, how to get on my business account, all those kinds of things are separate topics, and we very intentionally done it that way because trying to list all the things we were talking about when things were changing during the pandemic in particular would have been laughable because 2 months would have been out of date.
exactly. So what we've done is put those kinds of things in two different places for you. One of them is at the very bottom of the ChurchX page for this course, and it's called Library of Timeless Content. And that's intended to be evergreen stuff that you might find useful. And we've been slowly adding to that section of the course page. But also the onboarding for church treasurers course that I just finished and published a couple of weeks ago carries a lot more of that. And I hope that you'll find that to be not just a course that people go to when they take on this job, but a kind of interactive manual that you'll go and consult from time to time. I hope you will find it indexed a little more clearly than all the list of the webinars. And Andy, you will find if you go to that course, which I'll show you after Dave Jagger's finished, that I have done exactly what you're recommending, that I've taken some of the auto text and built a transcript for a lot of those webinars, and it will be searchable. So that's still a work in progress, but it's in a whole lot better shape than the list of recorded webinars, which really do get stale fairly.
Yeah, the amazing
fairly
thing is
quickly.
if you run it through once you've got it in text and you run it through Chat GPT, it'll index it and summarize it and do all sorts of stuff for you.
It sure will, but unfortunately, the version that's available to me isn't strong enough to take the length of webinars because Eric talks so much.
That's it.
So I can do 8,000 characters at a time, and I need to, it's time consuming to do it all just for a 90-minute webinar. Anyway, you don't need to hear my technical issues because we've got Dave Jagger on the line who is going to talk about his technical issues. So Dave, welcome, and we're glad you're here. Let me just find your name here on my list so that I can spotlight you. Remind us who you are and why you're on this call and what you're talking to us about tonight.
So I'm Dave. I work with the philanthropy unit. I am the lead for congregational stewardship, community faith stewardship. And I'm here tonight not only to tell you about our courses and get you to sign up and do all that advertising stuff that I do, but I'm actually here tonight to listen to you a bit. I have a couple of questions and I'd like some input from you folks on.
Okay.
So let me talk a little bit about our core stuff first. And I have a thing in the chat here set up, ready to go. There you go. Called to be the church, the journey. That's our stewardship program because we know that people are generous and we want to help you encourage them in their generosity, which is both good for your congregations and also good for mission and service and good for the church and the world as a whole. So you can go to the link that I put there in the chat, and that's see all the courses that are coming between now and December. We're ahead of the game for a change. But the next one is our Getting Started in Stewardship course. It's offered on the 19th of June at 2 times. It's free. It's an hour and a half time, and you'll get started in stewardship. So that's the way into the coursework. So I'd encourage you to go and sign up, but maybe wait till the end of the webinar or do it on another screen or something. That would be great. But as I said, tonight I want you to help me out. I have a couple of questions that I need to draw on your expertise to hear how you're doing and how you're doing things and what's going on, because we want our courses to be up to date. We want them to be current. And so we need to know what current is because we're pretty sure that current has changed. So Steve, you've got
Okay.
a poll question number 1.
I thought I had a poll and I'm seeing it on the website, but I'm not pulling it up here. And so
Okay.
talk for just another minute while I play with this and see if I can figure out what's going on.
We can get Eric to talk some more. I hear he talks a lot. It'd be good. So what Steve is going to do for us is he's going to put a poll up, and we're going to have the chance. You're going to have the chance to respond to it right here in Zoom, and we'll watch how that goes and how the answers come in. It has to do with where the money is coming into your community of faith, what it's coming through. And I don't, it's not a detailed poll. It's not like, oh, I got to pull up my balance sheet now and all that. No. Just kind of off the top of your head. I'm just looking for rough answers here. But what percentage of your community of faith's donations, and so we're not talking about rental income and we're not talking about fundraising, but actual donations from people are coming through these 5 different ways of giving. Let me know when you're ready, Steve.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to just take these as comments in the chat, Dave, because
okay.
it's not, it may be that I created it so late in the day today that the meeting room was already open, and so it's not seeing the ones that I created, and I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Then I'm going to put this question in the chat right now. There it is.
Here, I will. In fact, what I will do is share my screen.
Okay.
And yes.
So people can see it.
People can see it.
Yep. Great. There's always a way to do it.
Sorry about that. And let me just make the text there a little bigger so that you can see it more easily.
Don't worry about question number 2 yet. Just we'll deal with that later.
Yep, we're getting there.
Yep.
Okay. So here's your question. Off the top of your head, what percentage of your community of faith donation income comes through offering envelopes, PAR, e-transfer, other digital or online giving, and other forms of giving? So
That's
just
right. Lori says is
as you're answering, tell us offering envelopes, 20%, par, 25%, whatever it is.
yeah. Yeah, Janet's got the right idea there.
Yeah.
And I'll just offer this comment while we're waiting.
Yep.
I asked our administrator just yesterday whether we still did offering envelopes, and we don't.
We don't at
So,
my church.
so it's zero for me.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
In my church, we get maybe 4 or 5 envelopes in the plate on a Sunday. We no longer have an after church accounting team.
A couple of years ago, we put a real push on getting them on par, and we actually have about 65% of our offerings coming in through par.
Excellent.
Yeah. In my church, all of our big donations come in by par.
Yeah.
I would say probably 50% of our givers give by par and another 40% by Interac e-transfer. But all of the big ones come in by par.
Yeah. And when you do poll this, I think more formally, Dave, you should probably add gifts of securities. My church is probably unusual, but almost a third of our gifts are of our annual giving is
Interesting.
gifts of securities.
See,
Wow.
that for me and Dave's poll, that would come under other form of giving.
It would, but I'm suggesting to be more specific because the
Yes.
foundation provides a great service.
It's a fabulous service.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. And with it just being the end of PAR month,
Yep.
the PAR resources to help encourage people to give through PAR are on the PAR page on the United Church website. It's great to hear and to see some rough ideas here about how high PAR giving is, because monthly giving is great for both the congregation, but it's also good for the donor. Generous
Some-
on a regular basis.
Somebody has put in the chat that they don't track these things in these categories. And, I mean, I think Dave is not looking for an exact percentage, but rather off the top of your head. If you're the counter, you probably know this, and if you're not, you might not, and that's okay. But we're just trying to get a ballpark estimate here as a conversation starter rather than an exact percentage.
And again, I would really encourage you to maybe refine this and we could try it again in the fall or something, because it's going to be all over the map. I can tell you that the collection collection on Sundays is a rounding error in my setting.
Yeah, it is in mine too.
Mhm.
As I say, we get 4 or 5 envelopes a week. That's it.
The other option you might want to put on here, because I'd be interested to see how people are doing it, is either debit card or credit card, to the extent that people want to do that in church, as opposed to envelopes and cash.
Yep.
Because we simply don't issue envelopes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have stopped buying the envelopes. It wasn't cost effective.
One of the things I like with PAR, we have 3 donors on it that I have not seen in the church for 10 years. And we have one of those 3 donors that I have never seen in the church, and I've been there for over 30 years. But they still give faithfully.
The other form of giving that comes into my church is payroll deductions. We have 2 or 3 people in my church who work for a company that does charitable payroll deductions. One of them works for Bell Canada, I think. And there's an agency called Benevity. Then they do these big charitable drives in their workplaces, and some of them are for United Way and various different things. But often in those workplace charity drives, you can designate the registered charity you want to receive your monies, and so you can get credit in your departmental charity drive and donations to any registered charity in Canada. And we have 2 or 3 donors who do it that way.
And sometimes the company will double it.
Yes. Yep. Carol says we'd like to stop using envelopes, but we have about a dozen people who are very committed to using them. So we find it difficult to say we won't order them anymore. Why not just order the number you need?
Yeah.
I think you can order a box of 20.
Yeah, but we just don't want to handle the cash.
I
We
understand.
absolutely refuse to handle cash.
Cash is a pain.
Eric, do you on the security stuff? What we actually have is quite a number of people who give securities in December. So we recognize the donation in December, but we do the revenue recognition in the following year because they want it as part of their following year pledge.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a bookkeeping nuisance, but does Rose still allow people to do that?
We've stopped. We literally had a board decision, and our auditor supported. We stopped having premium or donations in advance, contributions in advance, because it made our stewardship reporting and even the accounting to some extent. You're always having to explain it.
Yep.
So we just decided it was a nuisance, and we did approach each of the donors who had a practice of this, and they all agreed, and so we stopped a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Ed says we received payroll deductions 1 year from an adherent, and the company refused to identify the individual as it would be an invasion of their privacy. That's surprising to me. The agencies that have handled those kinds of donations that have come through my church have always given me the name. You have to log in through their website and pull a report and various different things, but they do that because it's important to be able to thank the donor.
Yeah, but if I may on that, if I may being the new phrase, it's the same thing when someone phones the national office and says, I'd like to reach out to this minister that I had 10 years ago or whatever happened to. We can't technically give out that information.
That's right.
But we can go to the individual, go to that person and say, hey, there's been outreach. Here's, with permission, there's their email, and do it that way. And, if you do have a situation where the company doesn't tell you, then you can say to them, well, at least tell the individual that you are not telling us.
And probably what happens is that the individual donor has to check a box that says they're willing to have their name disclosed. Mm-hmm. And it may be that this particular person chose not to do that. So, I mean, you have to honor that if they choose to keep themselves private. And if it comes through one of those payroll agencies, you're not issuing the receipt anyway. The payroll agency is.
Okay. Right. So Dave's the one that's supposed to be doing too much.
That's right. You better do the talking here, Dave.
So
I'm just stepping all over your toes.
I'm watching the answers, and this is very helpful. What I'm curious about and would encourage people to think about then is to look at, and especially around COVID, but if you had answered this same question 5 years ago or pre-COVID, what would the percentages have been? How have things changed?
Yeah,
over the last 5 to 6 years.
And let me just say, with respect, the whole notion of cash and envelopes and no touch payment, obviously skyrocketed for all businesses, not just church.
Yeah.
But we literally have. I think we had Andy on there saying he doesn't want cash under any circumstances. He wouldn't have said that 5 years ago, even though he might have been thinking it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess what I want us to think about then is, if this shift has occurred, and I believe it has, you're giving me the evidence to show that it has, then what have you done, and how are you changing your processes, your thinking as leaders in the congregation around this too? I know that when we think about the offering on Sunday morning, we still oftentimes are so fixated on that plate, or whether it's at the back and people put something into it, or can on the way in or out, or whether we pass it or don't pass it, or what we do. But how are we finding ways to then also make sure that the people who are not giving in the traditional way, which is now most of our donors, how are we making sure that their gift is recognized equally? How are we thanking them? How is it a part of worship for them as well as for those who still, those 12 people who still have an envelope? That kind of stuff. Because otherwise, I think we can accidentally fall into the place where we make those who are not giving in the traditional manner feel like second-class donors. They don't get the same recognition. They don't feel included in the same way. So that would be something, if you guys have not given any thought to that, I would highly recommend that you do, so that everybody is not only treated equally and fairly, but if you want them to continue to give and to increase their giving, then that becomes even more important.
Well, Dave, just to clarify though, I'm not sure I quite understand. Uh, the isn't the notion of thanking people, isn't that independent of their methodology?
It should be. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But
I think
I've been part of worship where during the offering prayer, for instance, when the offering is dedicated, even if an empty plate is brought to the front just as a symbol, but where we give thanks for these gifts presented here today.
Hmm.
Well, I might have presented mine 2 weeks ago because that's when my PAR came out, or I might have presented mine earlier, or I might do it later on after I go home and I connect to Canada Helps or something. So we need to check our language, and we need to make sure that when we are doing those kind of statements, that we're finding ways to include all the different ways that people give.
Yeah.
and
And Dave,
I think
is there any like a one-pager guidance on this, or could you perhaps develop one? And uh,
That's
so that,
partly why I'm here to find out how things are going. We want to check our assumptions before we do the work. But yes.
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
when Dave, when you and I were talking about this yesterday, we were talking about how it continues to be important to present and bless the gifts in worship. That's a different thing from sending a thank you note every February.
Right.
And in our tradition, that's a part of how we worship God, is to present and the gifts that we have, whatever they may be, whether they're financial or otherwise, and ask for God's blessing on them. And I think what you're telling us is that the language we use when we bless the gifts or ask God to bless them needs to embrace all the methodologies. And maybe our ceremonies haven't kept up with our financial practice.
You said that very well. Yes.
I've learned from the best.
Exactly. When, before COVID, when what, 80-90% of the money that came into the church from donations probably came either through envelopes or PAR. Even then, we were often not mentioning the PAR people, although there were PAR cards that they could put in the plate. We were just so still focused on, we put our envelope in the plate, and PAR was the exception. Now we've got all these other ways that people are giving, and so we need to make sure that none of them are seen as the exception. That in fact, all gifts are not only valued, but all gifts are offered to God in the same way, offered for the work of the church in the same way. And therefore, at that time of worship, which is part of our responding in faith, all gifts are acknowledged in a similar way. Yes.
Mhm.
I'm trying to also read some comments as they go by here.
Yeah.
There's lots of good creative approaches happening. So I have another question. If you want to scroll up there we go. Similar to the first, but different. Same categories. From the top of your head, what percentage of the number of donors to your community of faith use these ways? So this isn't about how much money comes in these ways, but how many people use them. Because we find that there is not always a correlation between the most used format and where the most money comes from.
So as folks are offering,
About that, that'd be great.
giving you some anecdotal stuff here in the chat, I would offer that again, maybe unique in my setting, but I still get some folks who do big donations with post-dated checks.
Yeah.
offering envelopes is zero. Par is about a quarter, probably a little less than a quarter. And the digital forms are all growing. I think we can acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's where my church is at too. So since it's par month, Dave, remind us the advantages of par for treasurers.
For treasurers, par means that you're going to get a donation from the people who have signed up on par. I want to say it's the 16th of the month, thereabouts. Every month, it's consistent. You get a report that tells you how many people have given what, and it means that the cash flow evens out over the year. If your congregation is like most other congregations, you'll find that starting now and for the next 3 or so months, that the income from people's individual donations tends to drop off during the summer. PAR helps level that out so that it doesn't change as much. So that's one of the big
So
benefits.
Dave, you are supporting treasurers tonight, but I know you're also a minister. What's the advantage of PAR as a minister?
The advantage of PAR as a minister, our part of our piece in helping to nurture and feed strong disciples is to help them be generous and to teach generosity. That's one of the petals on the discipleship flower. And by encouraging people to give regularly, i.e. monthly, and to give proportionately, we are helping them to deepen their faith, rely more on God, and make a statement about what matters to them and what's important in their lives. We're helping them grow in generosity, and that's a huge ministry task.
Enormous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're running out of time for your piece. Any last words you want to share with us before we move on? Or anything jumping out at you in this that you'd like to highlight before we move on to the next topic?
One of the things that it was mentioned in the chat, I don't know if Eric mentioned it as well or not, but there are congregations who are not actually tracking these in these kind of categories for themselves. I would encourage you to do so that you can have some of these conversations for yourself. So I know I've asked you tonight just off the top of your head, but maybe go back to your office later, look at these numbers in a little more detail for yourselves if you're able to. And then this would make a fantastic conversation to have at your board, governing structure, council, leadership, whatever form you have or use for that. To talk about how has giving here changed in the last 6 years since COVID, and how are we responding to that? And thanks for having me.
Some folks from my congregation took one of your stewardship courses and brought back this kind of thing to our Bible study group. So it
Wow.
wasn't just the board that did it, but they used one of your Bible studies, and then out of that had a conversation with everybody in the study group around donations and how they come in and that kind of. It was very, very fruitful and interesting to have that conversation with people who were there for spiritual reasons, not for administrative reasons.
Great idea.
It was a super evening. And I didn't have to plan it, which was even better. Thank you, Dave. That's really helpful. And thank you to all of you who have responded. I apologize that the poll that I planned for this didn't work. Zoom is challenging sometimes, but so helpful to have your feedback and your perspective on these things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, folks.
Last question before we turn from this. As you folks, there's 100 of you online still. Any last minute learnings from this conversation as you look at all the numbers and notice how your church might be different from what some other churches are doing? What are the takeaways for you out of this conversation? We are not alone, says Lori. That's a good line. I think we should use that in other places.
Okay, Steve. So I'll reshare. We're actually I put Dave's piece towards the end, so I've just got a few reminder type.
Sure. And then you
Things.
wanted me to show people the onboarding course too. So
That's
when
right.
you're ready
So
for that, I will do that too. But you go ahead
okay,
and reshare.
okay. So I'll just very quickly. These will be things that folks have seen before. Let me just. So again, for those of you still using snail mail, and I know Harry Lee, I used to beg for this too, but Harry Lee, my successor, would love it if we got everyone on electronic payment. But in the meantime, these are the snail mail addresses for M&S payments and assessment. I mentioned earlier the foundation is the best deal that I've seen, the most cost-effective method for making stock gifts, and they provide it as a service, cheaper than Canada Helps, cheaper than the others that do this. And as I said, a third of my largest donors all do stock gifts. This is Susan Jackson's reminder, and just remember, this is so she can go and enjoy her place on Georgian Bay. So final deadline for June 23rd, so that we can organize and have timely reporting back to people in the fall. And we will be switching to 100% electronic statistical packages. I guess there's one more year before that happens. And as usual, your contact names and emails. You don't see mine there. I'm in background. And these Harry Lee, Angelica, Clyde, and Steve are still there too. And we look forward to helping you. But I'm going to stop sharing. And Steve, you might have a piece, but that treasurer onboarding is where we also store all the, sort of the key procedural things. And I just want to say you've taken such tremendous ownership. Remarkable to see finance and administration ownership. I'm going to say this from a minister. So thank you very much. And maybe you can share a bit with folks, and then we're done.
Well, I guess I think where your treasure is, your heart is also. So I think if Dave's laughing at me, but from my perspective, this is absolutely a piece of ministry leadership. So it's been an honor to be a part of this webinar and to be able to resource things in this way. So, and what fun to work with you guys too. As many of you know, my voice is choking up a bit because I'm retiring in the summer. So it's been a joy to be with you and a delight to have this aspect to my ministry. Let me show you what Eric and I have been working on for the last 8 months. So this is the onboarding for church treasurers course, and a lot of this material ought to be familiar to those of you who come to all of our webinars, but you'll find this program through well, I've sent you all a link, but you also find it through the catalog for United in Learning. So let me just find that for you so you'll see it. Here we are, onboarding for church treasurers, with a little calculator in the background in case any of you are not using computers and still use calculators. So that's how you or anybody else might find it and sign up for it. And here we are. We've divided this up so far into 9 different modules, and I've got a bit of a visual table of contents at the beginning. Role of church treasurer, getting set up online, introducing the financial handbook, payroll training, tax receipting, completing the annual charity return, GST rebates, insurance, and a catch-all for things that we hadn't thought of to include yet. And then you can just kind of scroll through it. And each section includes some brief videos. Often it's just Eric and me talking, and often just for a few minutes. I have put in a transcript of the video so that you can search it. And yes, Andy, I did that with AI, so it may not be perfect, but it's a whole lot better than me doing it. A variety of different things around, managing conflict, bunch of downloadable resources, getting set up online, the necessary accounts, how to get your team pay account, how to get access to CRA accounts. And Clyde and I want to re-record this webinar because it's a few years old and out of date. So that's something that Clyde and I are working on. Church Hub, of course, is important. The financial handbook, so far, we're still pointing to the 2017 one because I have about an hour left to do editing the 2025 one, and then it'll be posted here too. So it's coming, and when I'm done, I turn it over to Eric for him to tear apart again, and we will get it up for you as quickly as we can. But Eric's done a major rewrite on it, and then I went through with a fine-tooth comb and did some editing. And the one piece that I haven't rewritten so far is around um, um, counting and things, and we've got it was checks and signers and procedures if you want to have a bank account that only has one signature instead of two. And we've got some new advice on that. We've cleared it through our insurance company, and I just need to rewrite the portion of the handbook that includes that advice and then fly it over to Eric so that he can make sure that what I said is exactly what the insurance people agreed to. And then we can publish that and get that ready for you. Eric, you turned your mic on. Did you want to correct me on something?
No, Steve, just to say, again, this is something that we hope will be serving treasurers for years to come. We've tried to make it evergreen. We used to put, people's names and extensions and all kinds of things in there that, let alone stuff that changed. But more importantly, I'm holding up. I'm not sure if it shows in the camera. I have this for another purpose because I have a wedding anniversary, but this is a sign that should say celebrate. And Steve, we celebrate your work. Steve is one of the very first people to do a webinar, I think about 15 years ago. He and I have been trying to, we're pioneers for the church on this, but Steve's energy and enthusiasm and pastoral concern for all of us has been truly remarkable. And I just want to thank him on behalf of everyone who's here and frankly, the hundreds of treasurers that have benefited from your work, Steve. So wishing you all the best in retirement, but you've got a busy month ahead still.
Oh yeah, there's lots going on. I'm going to leave the rest of that onboarding course for you to look at on your own time because we seem to be talking about me instead of that, and that's just fine. The course is there, and I sent out an invitation to go and have a look at it and make some suggestions about it. Please do. It's intended to be the kind of thing where we can swap out a piece as it becomes outdated and leave the rest of it and kind of an interactive handbook. So we would be delighted to have your feedback and suggestions as we try to create this resource for all the treasurers across the church.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying many kind things in the chat too, and thank you for that. Is there anything else we need to cover tonight?
I just want to go back and just go back a little bit. Somebody posted in here, and unfortunately, I don't remember the name, and it was way back in the post. Receipting things after an auction. You come up to the fair market value. You can only receipt when it's over 125% of the fair market value.
Yeah.
So you can't just take a $5 item and say you'll receipt $6 and up. It just doesn't work. So I would suggest that if they want to get into that end of it, review the CRA pages. They're very good.
Excellent. And you'll find a link to those, oddly enough, in the Treasurer's onboarding course.
That's right.
That's one of the things that we are trying to put into the course so that you have a one-stop shopping, a sort of a place where you can find what you need and then be directed out to the right place. And so if you notice broken links or have suggestions of new links that we should add in, by all means do that too, and let us know so that we can keep it up to date. I think it's time to draw this to a close. So thank you to Eric and Clyde and Angelica and Dave for the work that you've done tonight and for all the ways that you have resourced the treasurers over the years. And I know this group is going to continue even as I bow out and somebody else takes over this chair. So This has become one of the flagship webinars for the church. We have over 850 people subscribed to our mailing list on this webinar, and that's by far the largest network we've got in the church. So a credit to all of you who have spread the word and found it useful, and we'll try to continue to make it as useful as we can.
Have a great summer, everybody.
Blessings to you all, and we'll reconvene this group again in fall. Take care, and God bless.
Okay, bye.